Welcome, life groups. We're joined by Sia, who preached a great message this past Sunday. We're going to look at how we're going to unpack his message and apply it to our lives. Hello, Sia.
Hello, anonymous person whose name is Aaron.
So, Sia, what's one thing you want to recap from your message?
So, not wanting to jump into too much detail because I'd love for guys to go watch the whole thing. But the crux of the message was around how, because we started a new series around the Happiness Project and how we get to a point of being deeply content, deeply joyful, deeply happy, and that goes beyond the nature of our external circumstances, but by the position of our internal world. So that requires us living from our spirit, not from the nature of our seasons. We can't do that if we don't intrinsically, completely and utterly trust God with all that we are. So I walked us on a bit of a journey to try and get us thinking around the truth of whether or not we trust God and how much we trust God, because that's the prerequisite from being able to live out of the fullness of His Spirit that He puts within us, because He says so Himself that His Spirit is within us. And if we don't believe that, then it's pointless. Like, it's pointless trying to live from the fullness of the Spirit. We actually really need to trust God and the Spirit that He puts within us and live from that. Now, not even to downplay the nature of stuff that comes at us, because life is life and it's sore and it's uncomfortable. But He gives us ways to navigate that in verses such as, cast your cares upon Him, for He cares for you. We get to give Him all of our anxiety, our fear, our worries, our doubts, our concerns, the nature of our seasons, and whether or not they change, that's okay, but we get to respond from the fullness of our spirit. So that's a quick nutshell response of how my message went on Sunday.
Awesome. And in what other ways can we begin to align our lives to live from the Spirit?
So this is really going to be broken up into three parts that we're going to unpack together as life groups. The first of that is to think, the next is to speak, and the last one is to do. So Joyce Meyer wrote a book, The Battlefield of the Mind, and she unpacks the idea of thinking about what we're thinking about. And the thing I want to highlight that is, are we aware of the work of God's power within our lives and within us? Like, are we aware of that? Are we aware of just how much we trust God enough to live from the fullness of His Spirit? Are we aware of, do we think of those things? In the same way that Paul writes to the church in Philippi and says, keep these things in the front of your mind and implant them in your hearts. So are we aware of those things? Do we think about them often? Do we think about whatever is excellent, whatever is praiseworthy, whatever is good repute, etc., etc.? Do we think about those things often enough for us to then be able to live out of that space or live from that space, or let those things define how we respond to the nature of the circumstances that happen to us? So the first question I'd like to pose to us this morning around the stuff that we're thinking about: how aware are you of the stuff that you're thinking about? And are those things aligned to you trusting God and the work of His power in your own life? The second of that is, you can chat about that as life groups. You can press pause at this moment because you will need to digest it a little bit. The second of that is what we speak about. What stuff comes out of our mouth? How do we speak quite negatively of our circumstances, forgetting that we have a God who is by our side, and when He's by our side, we are the majority? Do we speak positively and encouraging, and even if the circumstance looks like it's quite dire, we still speak life? Because there's a verse, a proverb that says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. So what kind of stuff are we saying? What kind of stuff is coming out of our mouths? Because as we know, how Paul writes it in the book of Philippians, he says, center your mind around these things and implant them in your hearts. And when we do that, whatever is in our heart will come out of our mouths. So when we align our thinking with trusting God and living from the fullness of His Spirit, to then let that set into our hearts, the way we respond, the stuff that comes out of our mouth will emulate what's already happening within our spirit. So the next question I want to ask us, today, this morning, or whenever you're watching this, is what kind of stuff is coming out your mouth? Like, are you speaking positively? Are you speaking from your spirit? Are you speaking in reaction to the stuff that's happening to you? And when and how can you begin to start catching that stuff? And once you think differently, then you can begin to speak differently about the nature of your circumstances. And the last bit that we're going to chat about together today is what can you then begin to do? Because once we've contemplated these things, once we know which areas of our lives we don't fully trust God and how we can begin to adjust that and align ourselves to completely trust God with every area of our lives, and then we live out of the fullness of the Spirit, that has to result in some level of doing, some level of action, some level of a faith step. So I'm moving towards God in some manner or fashion in response to what I've now gained a revelation on. So what's one thing that you can begin to do to live your life as though you completely trust God and you're living out of the fullness of His Spirit? So as life groups, we're going to be mindful about what we think, mindful about what we speak about and what comes out of our mouths. And we're going to do something, take a faith step, have an action that we're going to apply to our lives. That's hopefully, and if we're willing to grab a hold of this, change the way that we live our lives, and we can live far more deeply rich, deeply content, deeply joyful, deeply happy lives, no matter the nature of our circumstances, in the same way that Paul himself was able to. I love how he writes the back end of Philippians 4, in the back end of verse 9, where he says, whatever you've received, whatever you've heard and seen in me, put these things into practice. So as to say that it's not impossible, it's not out of reach. I myself have learned how to live this way. So once we've digested the thinking, the speaking, and the doing, then we put those things into practice. And like Paul, we can encourage others to do the same, because we ourselves are the examples that are to live completely dependent on God and living from the fullness of His Spirit. So we are joyful, content, full of life, no matter the nature of the circumstances that come at us. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Sia.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I had some time, so I thought I... Kidding. Yeah, it's a great pleasure to be with our life groups. I hope the conversation is really great and gives you guys ways you can help each other out and stand together as a community. But yeah, I'm excited for what this series is going to do for us as a church.